Good morning again, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here with you all. Definitely the Governor, Premier, members of Cabinet, members of clergy, honorable members of your assembly, private sector, participants, stakeholders, on all things concerning the environment. And clearly you're here because you have an interest in TCI and its health and its future and its prosperity. So I thank you all for being here. I cannot go forward without saying a few additional words about my ministerial colleague, the Honorable Josephine Conley. And happy to share with you whatever Bermuda can offer, Minister. But I cannot go further without speaking something about Minister Conley and experience that we had together in COP. I was designated because of Bermuda's role at the time of being chair of UCATA as the leader of the delegation, which included a number of overseas territories to COP upon the invitation of the British government. But I can assure you, we were a team. And Minister Conley was an outstanding member of that team. She brought her energy, her enthusiasm, and her not taking no for an answer approach to her presence. And that helped all of us to achieve what we were able to achieve at COP. So I thank the minister. Her friendship and her camaraderie for me has been inspirational, and I am grateful for all of that from her. And she's a great representative and leader for Turks and Caicos Islands in this space of the environment and climate action. Just want to tell you all that from the bottom of my heart. So when she contacted me to participate, there was no in the answer because she don't take no for an answer. So I'm happy to be here and to be participating with all of you in this conference. Let us not forget, this is Earth Day. Earth Day. And that's important, to have held this conference on Earth Day. And your theme, One Earth, investing in our planet, is absolutely topical. It's absolutely relevant. Not only about investing in the planet, but investing in yourselves, investing in the region, investing in your island and your people. That's what that means. And it's important that this summit, perhaps the first amongst the overseas territories, is held here in Turks. So I congratulate the Turks Island government for initiating this. And certainly thankful to the team that supports Minister Conley, who has helped to put this together, as she articulated all of them and the work that they have done to get this together. As many of you are aware from statements that have been made since COP26, internationally and of course within the region, small island states are at the forefront, and other developing nations, of the impacts of climate change. We don't contribute the greenhouse gas emissions. We don't contribute most of the pollutants that are plaguing the planet in this area. But we're at the forefront. We're on the front line. Islands like ours and other parts of the world, we are seeing, you saw the film that was done about our oceans that we took to COP. You see the reality. We are at the forefront, and this is something that cannot be underestimated. Now, what else do we face? We face rising sea levels, which is a threat to every one of our island nations. And it's expected over the next couple decades, we will see more extreme weather events. There's going to be more Irmas. There's going to be more Marias. These were events that we normally had only perhaps once a century or once a lifetime. We're going to see more of that. That is the reality. That's the threats that we face. This will also include more intense storm and weather, higher sea levels and tides, increased and unpredictable rain and rainfall, which most of us have to rely on rainfall to replenish our groundwater and underwater supply. That could become more infrequent. Our marine ecosystems are at risk. The coral bleaching, things like stony coral tissue loss, and other issues that contribute, such as desalination of the oceans around us, is putting our marine situation at risk for every island. And this situation, particularly desalination, with sea level rise, could potentially affect our precious water supplies. There's our infrastructure, the infrastructure that we lay to ensure we have electricity, other essential resources moving through our communities. That could be impacted by climate change. What about our cruise ports? What about our roadways? The system that supports energy production and distribution, the low-lying areas, beaches that support the tourism industry that TCI and even Bermuda needs. We do not want to find a world where the beaches are gone, the temperature has risen so that the fauna is depleted or damaged, or it's so uncomfortable no one wants to travel to our region because it's too hot, it's too uncomfortable, it's too inhospitable. These are the things that we face with climate change. I know the importance that tourism plays to your current development, and I congratulate you on what you're accomplishing, but without the addressing of climate change, the continued sustainable prosperity in this space is seriously at risk. So it's vital that we commit to addressing climate change aggressively. It is also important that we assess our risks, but it's also important that we keep our people and the social cohesion and their health in mind as well, because increased impacts from climate change will impact all that. That impacts government expenditure, that impacts earnings possibilities, that affects opportunity. These are the things that we face. And we must, as governments, commit to a level of public sector financing and support, but also to encourage public-private partners in this effort. Now, I don't want to belabor you with all the problems that climate change faces us. You hear that all the time. We all hear it all the time. It's almost depressing when you turn on your television and you hear the stories of what's happening around the world around climate, the ocean pollution, plastics, the threat to marine life. It can be depressing. But we bring strengths to this situation as islands, some of which were articulated earlier today. Overseas territories are custodians of some of the world's most important habitats, from the Antarctic to the Caribbean to the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. We're everywhere. And we are custodians of important areas of our planet. And at the same time as we're the custodians, many of us are at the forefront of renewable energy, of nature-based solutions, adaptation and resilience, and protection, and also finding ways to properly finance what needs to be done. We're the ones pushing much of this. The issues around loss and damage were articulated by the island states most aggressively, and has already been articulated by a number of the speakers. The UK overseas territories in particular control or have responsibility for a fifth of the world's marine estate. That is almost difficult to contemplate when you consider most of us are these little islands in the middle of nowhere. Bermuda is, certainly. Almost nowhere. Took me a long time to get here, I know. Get up at 5 o'clock in the morning just to get here in your afternoon. So we're in the middle of nowhere. But with that marine estate comes 90% of the diversity that's within the UK family amongst our little territories. That's enormous. A fifth of the world's marine estate? It's an incredible responsibility that we have. And at the same time, we are vital to the United Kingdom reaching the goal of 30% of the protections by 2030. So we're an essential piece of the global picture when it comes to addressing climate change, when it comes to marine protection, when it comes to dealing with the issues around oceans and their viability and their survival, ocean health. We are crucial. What happens in our waters affects everywhere. So we must not underestimate the strength and the leverage we bring to this campaign. It's important that we remember that. Don't underestimate the size, and the Premier said it earlier about how being small is a blessing. In this case, we bring strong leverage to the picture, the global picture. And we are vital to that effort that the UK needs to reach as a contracting party to the Paris Agreement. So with some of those, and those are just some of the attributes we have, we must work together. Bermuda, Cayman, Anguilla, BVI, in particular in this region, but globally, the rest of the territories, it's essential that we work together. But we must, as a part of our solution efforts, clearly understand the risks that we face. The risks are real. And one of the things that we think is essential for all territories to do is to go through and have an exhaustive process of assessing the risks that is around your situation when it comes to climate change. And start that process. Because once you know the risks, you can prioritize them. Some of them are more immediate. Some of them may not be foreseeable until 20, 30 years or further down the line. So as governments that have limited fiscal resources, we can prioritize what we're going to deal with early on, the next 5, 10, 20, stretching out. Proper risk analysis of our climate situation is what's essential to meeting that. Now, this may seem easier said than done to some of us, but particularly from a financial standpoint, and the resources to do that may seem considerable. But Bermuda has had some success in this. This is some of the solution-driven idea that I think I can bring here that may be helpful to you. Because Bermuda has secured funding from the UK government to enter into an exhaustive climate study. And our fiscal year ended the 31st last month, and we have successfully received that funding. And we have already started to have an exhaustive climate study done of Bermuda. And this study will be all comprehensive on everything that has to do with the impact of climate change on our island. And the study will make predictions specifically for Bermuda with the projection timeline for best and worst case scenarios and climate change scenarios for short, medium, and long term. And I'll just give you some of the detail of what that study will actually encompass so that you have an idea of how detailed it will be. Undertaking a vulnerability assessment for major infrastructure, such as our airports, ports, public highways, electricity generation, subterranean utility and telecommunications framework, and our waste-to-energy plant as well, and our sewage management systems. Identifying what effects sea level rise will have on waterways, inshore ponds, marshes, from an ecological perspective. Identifying government infrastructure and facilities located to the most exposed areas, particularly close to our shoreline, that may be at risk from erosion or inundation. Identifying agricultural areas that are vulnerable. Food security is human security. Food security is survival. Remember that. We cannot leave food security out of this picture. And so We will be ensuring the study looks at agricultural areas vulnerable to saltwater inundation and soil salination within the context of food security and cultivation. Of course, it's important that we diversify the ways that we pursue agriculture as islands, because obviously traditional agriculture has its limits, and other ways that may not have that exposure should be considered and taken on. We are doing that, and our study will help us to, at least from the standpoint of our land resources, understand what we need to do to protect them. Updating coastal erosion and flood inundation projections for the offshore bays, beaches, dunes, and especially those areas that experience a level of flux or change or shock from storms and hurricanes. Understanding the effects of coastal erosion and sea level rise will have a mean level sea level benchmark, thereby impacting waterfront properties. Like Minister Connolly mentioned, we do have coastal zone protection areas that are no-go areas to ensure setbacks from certain types of development. So those are important things, and we need to understand the long-term impact, and perhaps even to increase those thresholds or create new planning standards for coastal development over the rest of the inland development. These are the things that the study will help us to decide how we're going to shape. Identifying coastal areas prone to hydraulic erosion and or destabilization of cliff faces for our island. We are a limestone island, and our cliff faces have experienced significant erosion over the years, the last couple of decades at least. So we need to understand what will be the further long-term impacts on that. Mapping projections for inundation across Bermuda, identifying both low-lying coastal areas that will be periodically or permanently inundated by seawater, and low-lying freshwater resources that could be impacted by saltwater intrusion. Making recommendations for products and construction methods that can effectively reduce erosion for those areas that I just mentioned. And identifying, which I think is important, this may be a very difficult thing to do for some jurisdictions, especially as you promote development, create no-go areas where there will never be development of any type. Because if you do the study, if you assess the risk, you'll see that projections out, you'll see that certain areas will become vulnerable. Some of the hotels that we as islands build for the wonderful beachside view where somebody can leave their room and walk on the beach, those hotels could be at risk in 30 years. And that's a risk to the investment that they brought to your island and for themselves. You don't want those beaches gone. You don't want those properties to be inaccessible or bad investments for whoever's invested in them going forward. So we need to have studies like this done so we can assess our risks, so that we mitigate those risks even as those properties currently exist or are in place. And also identifying critical infrastructure components at risk in the near, medium, and long term. And one thing this study is going to do, it's going to allow us, when completed, to project out these impacts for 50, 100 years. That is how exhaustive the study is going to be. That's the sort of projections we as islands need to be able to have and understand and be able to contemplate in our decision making. Out that far, 100 years. We need to know what the impacts are going to be. Now, alternatively, small island states within the region, if you are unable to pursue these studies individually, if you're grouped together, you can jointly support such studies together. These are one of the ways that we can work together instead of taking on the full investment of those exhaustive studies on our own. And we can create a pool of resources that will allow us to benefit from the results of those studies. We must share the outcomes of these studies with each other, because whatever Bermuda learns about what's happening in Bermuda can benefit TCI, can benefit BVI, can benefit others. So this makes no sense, my island, taking our study and hiding it from anybody else. We should share it, and we intend to do that. That is our commitment, is to share with BVI, TCI, Cayman, Anguilla, and others the results of that study. These are just some of the things that we can do with others. And I also encourage you to benefit from academia. Academia is often keen to come into our territories and work with us to complete these studies. And sometimes they'll do it themselves without any financial commitment because it's a part of their own, building their own research base. So academia, international organizations, and research institutions are out there who want to work with us to study and do these studies. Pursue them, investigate, and invite them in on terms that are mutually beneficial to you. But we can share from all of this data that is produced because it will benefit us all. Now, I think it's also important to understand something very important to the picture that we must create for ourselves. And again, I congratulate TCI on your success in attracting development for your visitor industry. Bermuda would love to be in the same position you are. Absolutely. We're kind of the mature lady of tourism. You're the Miss World of tourism. And so we congratulate you on your success. But it's important that the same work you put into attracting that development, you put into your environmental protection. The same enthusiasm, at least, that you craft your development proposals and opportunities for your international investors, you must put the same energy into environmental investment and protection internally and internationally. I think we have, as a global community, and time and experience has helped us to learn this, and that development is good, but we've now understood that some of that development wasn't as good for us as it should have been. And we need to have a different philosophy about development. We need to put as much energy into the protections as we do into the development, and balance responsible development with responsible protections. And this is important. I think that's the new philosophy we must pursue, even as we are doing these things to enhance our quality of life, to build opportunities for our people, which is so important. And the social emphasis that the Premier made is so crucial as well, because we're trying to build a good social framework for our country so that the social fabric is supported and benefits the people. But we must put the investment into that environmental protection as much as we put into the economic development. That is going to be crucial going forward. And it's also crucial that we have robust regulatory frameworks, particularly for environmental protection. Bermuda has done a lot of work in that. Happy to share that with further with TCI and other islands. We've had environmental protection legislation since 1600s. So we have a history of it. And we've been, even in the last couple decades, been doing a lot to enhance legislative protections and also enforcement. It is crucial that with the robust environmental protection framework, you have good enforcement and you balance it. And we're always pushing, and we have a strong presence of our environmental organizations like our National Trust, who, and I as a planning minister, I see their objections to development all the time, all of the groups. But they play a role in supporting the robust enforcement and protection. So we must work with them to ensure, if that's the philosophy that we wish to build around partnership and working together, work with them. At the same time as they fulfill their mandates, governments and other organizations must fulfill theirs. But working together with them and ensuring robust regulatory framework around the environment, even around the energy sector, is important. We must also look to encourage, of course, outside investment in the green technologies, solar, wind, ocean technologies, and have a coordinated strategic approach to climate change around these technologies, and to effectively devise and implement dynamic overarching plan that will mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. So as we bring these technologies online, we should do them in a way that doesn't further violate the environmental priorities, but advances clean air, clean water, better land management and use and conservation, and was maximize our understanding of various initiatives. Because from these experiences, we will build up our own wealth of knowledge, because self-sustainability is crucial as you do this. This is not about building dependence on the outside. It's about building sustainability and reliability on the inside. We must work on training our own people, building up our own expertise in research and in management of environmental systems, energy systems, and all those procedures that we need to ensure the protection of our agricultural framework. We must build local capacity so that we can be self-sustained. Just as we must move away from being like dependence on fossil fuels, we must invest locally in energy sustainability and independence in the energy sector for ourselves. Now, I say all this because I think it's important that we, and I say we, I'm talking about all of us as islands, we must become the voices, the strong voices in the campaign for climate action. We cannot leave that up to the UK government or other larger industrial nations to be our voice. We can work with them. We can tell them that we're committed to the principles of the Paris Agreement, but we must become our own advocates in the global fight for climate change. So as we welcome the cooperation with the UK government, we as overseas territories must work together. And one of the reasons I've come here, because I wanted to come as a symbol of my commitment and my government's willingness to partner with the Turks and Caicos and with our other overseas colleagues coming out of the COP26 experience to move forward together with one voice on climate and on the environmental protection. Now, as I close, I'd like to say a few things. One, I again congratulate Turks and Caicos for the charter which you're about to sign. I request permission, if I can have from the Turks and Caicos government, to take your charter back to my government for consideration of perhaps shaping a similar charter which will create a unified voice for all of us. And perhaps my BVI colleague can do the same. We can certainly talk to our TCI and Anguilla and other colleagues to perhaps take the charter framework that you have put in place and try and model it so that we can all have a unified charter commitment that is fashioned after a charter that we have fashioned for ourselves. So I ask permission to do that. I hope I can get that from the TCI government to take back to Premier Burt and my colleagues to consider. I would also like to say that out of this experience that I've had in the environment and in energy, because I'm most responsible for the regulation in Bermuda of the energy sector and the telecommunications sector, is that working together is what, and working collectively within the community and internationally with our partners, and our primary partners, I feel, are the overseas territories. And the small steps that we have to take will create a big footprint. We already have a big footprint. I said earlier, control and responsibility for some of the most important international marine habitats. 1/5 of the global marine estate. We have the opportunity to make a big footprint and to make a difference in the global effort to our benefit and the benefit of the world around climate change. I wish to thank you all for allowing me to come and speak. Thank you, Minister Connolly and her team, and everyone in TCI who has been so wonderful for myself and MP Famous and Minister Wheatley's presence here. It's been a wonderful experience so far. I want to thank you all. Thank you.